So the big tools, the thing that I want you to really get hold of is the law and the conscience. They're powerful allies we have within the person you're sharing the gospel with. God's put, as it were, fifth colonists, or whatever you call them, the people behind the enemy's lines to help us with sharing the gospel. They're inside them. The law in their hearts, their conscience, sometimes condemning them, sometimes excusing, sometimes condemning them. Wrong way. And there's WDJD, which is not law, as it were. You can change it, you can use it as you want, but it's a practical help to sharing the gospel. WDJD, what did Jesus do? So who's remembered that? What was W? Would you consider yourself to be a good person? Would you consider yourself to be a good person? What will they say? Yes. So, D. Not destiny yet. Later. Do you think you've kept the 10 Commandments and you want to go through a few? Now, who knows the 10 Commandments now? In order. Let's have another go through them. Number 1. No other gods. God's first. No other gods before him. He's number 1. No other gods. No idols. You shall not make yourself any graven images. You shall not make up a god in your own ideas. Blasphemy. Do not you misuse the name of the Lord your God. Number 4. Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Number 5. Honor your father and mother. And help me get that a bit more into their hearts. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. It's important. I think all too easily children think speaking ill of their parents or speaking back to their parents doesn't really matter. It's just in the family. But it's important. Rebellion is bad stuff in God's eyes. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder. And more importantly, in the heart, Matthew, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 tells us that hatred in the heart is something that can lead us to judgment. Number 7, what was that? Adultery, the broken heart. And again, to help bring that to a little bit more easy to people, what are we looking at? Sermon on the Mount. Lust. Looking on someone with lust. Matthew 5:28 there. If you look at someone with lust, you commit adultery in the heart. Many people, there's no problem. They're sexually immoral. Well, there is a problem, but they're sexually immoral and they know it. But perhaps particularly the older people, they've never committed sexual adultery in the sort of legal sense, but they're still guilty of it in their heart. Well, except some of us. 8, shall not steal. And how many thieves? No thieves will inherit the kingdom of God. And number 9, how many liars have their place in the fire, the lake which burns with fire and brimstone? All. And that's Revelation 21:8. And number 10, what was number 10? Not covet. So you've got number 10, the guy looking at the ring through the door there, shall not covet. So here we are, the 10 Commandments. So we're going to go through a few of them. And what are we looking for? What's the one thing the law should be doing? Sorry? Activating the conscience, yes. I want to be looking for this. Their mouth be stilled. Keep at the law until the law's done its work of making them guilty before God. And you see that by their mouth stopping or their voice changing. Don't move too quickly to share the good news with someone who doesn't want it, who's not ready for it. And we're looking at by your own admission. We're not accusing them. They accuse themselves as well. By your own admission, you are a whatever we've spoken about, lying, thief, blaspheming, adulterer at heart, whatever's appropriate there, by their own admission. So that's WDJ. WDJD. J was judgment. If God were to judge you by those 10 commandments, would you be guilty or innocent? And they may say innocent. And you have to go back over and help them see that actually innocent is a figment of their imagination. Some people talk about God being a figment of your imagination. Their innocence is. They're guilty. And they know it really. And sometimes you need to say, look, listen to your conscience. You know. You just told me. Help them see where they stand. And they may come with all sorts of excuses. I'm a good person. Well, what if they just told you? You're a lying thief, an adulterous blasphemer at heart, or whatever it is you've done. So you may have to go back over that. You've just confessed too. I did it all a long time ago. It's another thing we hear. You know, that was in my past. I've learned from it now. I'm a better person now. Does that make any difference? What's the statute of limitation, as it were, on sin? God's outside time. He sees it all as now. You offend him 3 years ago. It's today with the Lord. It offends him now. Your future sins offend him now. I've done more good than bad. On the whole, I'm a good person. Does that matter? If you've once gone out and sold crack cocaine and the police catch you and bring you before the court saying to the judge, yeah, I'm a good person most of the time. I only sell crack cocaine at weekends. Is it going to make any difference? Now, there are perhaps mitigating circumstances within the law system, and you may get a lesser sentence for some reasons and so on. But the guilt doesn't change, does it? And with God, there's no time period that makes a difference. And doing more good than bad doesn't deal with that. How much good does it take to wipe out sin? If you murder someone, how many times do you have to help an old lady across the road before you're not a murderer? Doesn't matter. Doesn't change, does it? Doesn't change. I think God will forgive me. God's a nice God, isn't he? God forgives people. God will forgive me. Where's the challenge with that? Second commandment, they've invented a new God. They've made a God in their own image. God says he's going to judge every work. They've invented a God who's going to let everybody off. They've just broken another of the commandments. I've only broken a few. What was the answer for I've only broken a few? James 2:10 is where we're looking for with that. If you offend in one point, if we've got to put our chain back, how many links do we need to break? One. If you offend in one point, you're guilty of breaking all. You're a lawbreaker. So it's WDJD. And D was destiny. So if God were to judge you by the 10 commandments, are you guilty or innocent? Guilty. Would you go to heaven or hell? And again, they may say heaven because God will let me off or whatever, and you need to deal with that. But if they get to hell, if they get to admitting to hell, not if they get to hell. If they get to admitting to hell, then you're at the point of saying, does that concern you? And only really when that concerns them, only if it concerns them that they've offended a holy God who will judge them and that that they're going to end up in hell for, only then really can we then start sharing with them the good news, because until then, they don't want the good news. It's like trying to, give someone who's healthy disgusting medicine for a dreadful disease. They don't want it. They don't need it. You've got to show them where they are. So destiny, do you think you will go to heaven or hell? And the times when you may need to perhaps take them to a judicial system to show that however much the judge may like you, if you're guilty, he has a duty as a righteous judge to deal with you. And does that concern them? If it doesn't, if hell doesn't concern them, it may well be that they have a wrong understanding of what hell is. They may have this attitude that hell's going to be a place where their friends are and they're going to have a party. But the truth is that that's not what hell's about. They may have an idea from the radio or television or other places that hell is a place where Satan rules and where Satan and the demons punish people for their wickedness, or have parties with people for their wickedness or whatever. But it's not actually, it's a place of eternal conscious punishment made for the devil and his angels. Satan doesn't rule in hell. It's not his kingdom. It's his punishment. And you need to be saying to them, do you want Steve, John, whoever you're speaking to, Mary, do you want to join Satan in his punishment? Do you want to partake with what he's going to get? You don't. Only if it concerns them then can we move forward, really. So, does that concern you? And then we find that people are moved, normally, fairly naturally, from being proud and self-righteous, declaring themselves to be good, to being humble. And remember that God resists the proud. So if they're proud, you can't take the gospel to them. I would say if someone is coming to you saying, I'm okay, I'm all right, if they're still proud, don't take the gospel to them. Because you're in a position where you're trying to draw them to you. Who can we draw? Who's this young lady? What's your name? Justine? Come here, Justine. No, stay there. I'm saying come here, and God's saying, no, go away. God's pushing her away, and I'm saying come here. God resists the proud. So if we're in a position where we're trying to share the good news with people that God is pushing away, who's going to win? You're going to beat him? So there's no point sharing the gospel with the proud. You're in a losing battle. So, some tools. You've got the law and the conscience and WDJD. Let's look at some more specific tools. Get those little particular ones that fit in this situation or that deal with that problem. A couple of general ones to start with. There's the chip in the brain idea. If people are having trouble understanding what they've done or their situation, you could talk to them about, what if we were to put a chip in your brain and record everything that you did for the next week or the next month, and then we played it back in public or to your friends and family, and we showed a screen of your thoughts, your words, your actions. How would that make you feel? Now, we have a challenge that today many people are proud of their sinfulness, and they'll happily go on television and show off their debauchery. Not everybody. With a lot of people, they would be embarrassed if their secret sins were known. But we have a position now where many people would be proud of their sins. It doesn't always work. You can talk about just listen to your conscience. Just a very simple tool, as it were. Look, listen to your conscience, John. You know what's going on in your heart. You know that you've rebelled against God. You know where you stand. And just speaking to them plainly, saying, listen to that voice in your heart, can be enough for them to say, you're right. I do know that. And even if then they don't, they may go around the corner and in their mind they know. Because they do know. The Bible tells us they have a conscience that condemns them. So trust the Bible. So reaching specific people groups. Just a couple of throw-in tools, but let's look at reaching specific people groups. Remember that we may face genuine questions. Anybody here a farmer? Anybody here a gardener? Anybody here ever eaten a piece of fruit? Do you remember the parable of the 4 different types of soil? The rocky soil and so on. How do you get good soil? If you've got bad soil, how do you get good soil? You have to prepare it. We may be preparing the ground. Remember that the time you go out today to do evangelism may not be a time of reaping, but a time of sowing or maybe not even sowing yet. Maybe at the moment it's digging a few rocks out and pulling a few weeds. If they've been all their life taught evolution, and they believe they're just an evolved piece of slime, you may have some rocks to move. If all their life they've been taught, do what you like, if it doesn't hurt anybody else, just get on with it. Even if it does hurt someone else, just get on with it. Enjoy yourself. There probably is no God, so get on with your life and be happy or whatever they say. So you may have some preparation to do. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. If people humbly have questions, if people are saying, but the world's millions of years old, how can the Bible be true? That may be a place where you can answer, and if you don't have answers to that, There is the Kent Hovind DVD series that is available. If they're coming saying, oh, the Bible's just a fairy tale, that may be a place where they're still the proud and God's resisting. But if they're humbly coming, there may be answers you can give there. Now remember, not to cast your pearls before swine, and your time is holy. Do not give that which is holy to the dogs. Your time is holy. Your mind is holy. Your conversation with them is holy. Don't give it to those who are just treating the gospel in a poor way. You know, there may be a time to shake the dust off your feet and move on to someone who's prepared to listen. But if there are genuine questions, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. A man coming humbly saying, I got trouble with this. I sort of believe, but help my unbelief. It wasn't thrown away by the Lord. What about Nicodemus? How can a man be born again when he is old? How can he enter a second time into his mother's womb? Man, he's struggling with the concepts that he was being given. Did Jesus say, Nicodemus, get out? I think he did, pull his leg a bit and say, you're a teacher of Israel, you don't understand. He pulled his leg a bit perhaps, but he dealt with him compassionately, shared with him. There may be times when we have things to share. So reaching specific people groups. So as you go out on the streets to share the gospel, you meet different types of people. What about the Christian? What do we say when we meet a Christian out there and we're sharing the gospel? Hang on, have I gone mad? Do we need tools to share the gospel with Christians? Why? Because they may not be saved. I went to a bus depot once, but I'm not a bus. Don't look funny at me, I'm not a bus. They may have been to church, but it doesn't mean they're a Christian. So when you meet a Christian, what I'd do, I'd say, fantastic, tell me, how did you come to the Lord? Tell me your testimony. How did you get saved? And, they're either going to say, oh, it was marvelous. I was at this evangelistic crusade by so-and-so, and or they're going to say, well, my parents are Christians, or I've always gone to church. And depending on where you come with that, whether you need to share the gospel with them or whether you can rejoice with them as a brother and say, come join me, here's a tract to give out. So I just throw that in there, really. Remember, not everybody you meet who says, oh, marvelous, I'm a Christian too, is a Christian. Let's have a look at some more normal Christian groups to meet out there. The atheist. How do we share the gospel with the atheist? What tools are there we can use with the atheist? Well, the first thing I'd say is don't be intimidated by their white coat of respectability and their scientific, we're rationalists, We believe in science, not fairy tales. Don't be fooled by that. Because are they actually wise? The Bible says, the fool has said in his heart there is no God. Now, I'm not saying that we go out there and mock them. We go out there with love. But just remember, when you're confronted with someone who claims to be an atheist or they don't believe in God, don't be intimidated when they come at you with science and respectability and we're rational and you're irrational and so on. They're actually the fool. Remember also, profess themselves to be wise, they became fools, Romans tells us. And remember their motivation. What's their motivation for what they're saying? Back to Psalms 14 again, Psalm 14 verse 1. The fool has said in his mind there's no God. Yes? With his rational thinking there's no God. With his scientific evidence there's no God. No, with his heart. They don't want there to be a God, not they don't believe there's a God. They have other motivations. Sir Julian Huxley. Why does she knight someone who's... Anyway, Sir Julian Huxley. I suppose the reason we leapt at the origin of species, that's Darwin's book on evolution, was because the idea of God interfered with our sexual mores. They wanted to be sexually immoral, and God would interfere with that. You can't be immoral while thinking that there's a God who's watching what you're up to. You've got to blank that out somehow. Have a listen.
You an atheist?
Yep.
Why?
Because I believe in choice and not having to listen to somebody tell me what to do.
Boy, that's one of the most honest atheists I've ever met. You don't want God telling you what to do.
Nope.
He's an atheist because he doesn't believe in God? Because he doesn't want the God he does believe in, Romans 1 tells us he believes in him, does believe in, to tell him what to do. He wants to rebel. Now, not everybody will be as honest as that with you, but that's the root of where they stand. We know there's a God, we reject him, not we believe there isn't a God. Anyway, back to Sir Julian. He's the grandson of Thomas Henry Huxley, who was Darwin's bulldog, Darwin's publicist, the man who promoted, as it were, Darwin's theories more than Darwin did, really. He was the one who got on. So he's the grandson. He's right there in the sort of family of it. And he's the president of the United Nations Education, Scientific, Cultural Organization, UNESCO. A lot of atheists, a lot of God disbelievers, God haters, get themselves into positions where they can teach, where they can promote what they believe. And you'll find that there's a lot more liberals, homosexuals, etc., in things like the BBC than would be representative of the population, I believe, because they want to promote what they believe. They want to promote their message. Anyway, moving on. Sir Arthur Keith. Evolution is unproved and unprovable. We believe it because the only alternative is special creation or God, and that's unthinkable. Not because of their science, because they don't want it. Dr. George Wald says, I do not want to believe in God, therefore I choose to believe that which I know is scientifically impossible, spontaneous generation arising to evolution. And he should know what he's talking about with evolution, because he's the Nobel Prize winner and Professor Emeritus of Biology at Harvard. He knows it's impossible, but he promotes it and teaches it because he does not want to believe in God. We speak too much about their motives and so on. Let's move on. So, how do we share the gospel with an atheist? I told you the answer last session. Go on. Would you consider yourself to be a good person? Would you consider yourself to be a good person? That's how we share the gospel with almost every type of people we're going to speak to, everybody we're going to speak to about today. Would you consider yourself to be a good person? And with atheists, it's fairly easy because they declare themselves good. Millions are good without God. You can be good without God. Good without God. You can be good without God. Humanism in Canada. All over the place. Another one of their big posters that they were promoting talks about the third richest person in the world pledged to give 99% of his wealth to charity at the end of his life, mind you. Warren Buffett, good without God. Bill Gates giving £26 billion to charity. How much is he keeping though? Anyway, good without God. And then they talk to us about here Pat Roberts, the wealthiest evangelical Christian in the world, donates almost nothing. How do they know what he donates? What does the Bible tell us to do about our donations? Keep it secret. Not let your right hand know what your left hand's doing. How do they know what he's giving? If he believes the Bible, he wouldn't be publicizing it. But the whole idea anyway is that you can be good by giving. If you do lots of wicked things, but you give some money or you give some goodness, doesn't make you a good person, does it? You have bent standards by which you measure yourself. But anyway, so they proclaim good without God. So what do we say to them? Would you consider yourself to be a good person? They say, yes, sure, I'm an atheist. I'm a good person without God. Can I ask you a few questions? How many lies you told this year? And you just exposed their emperor's suit of clothes. Are they good without God? Let's ask. Address their conscience, not their mind if you can. Because with their mind, they will argue with you about science and about this, that, and the other, and about billions of years and carbon-14 dating and lots of things that they'll try and tie you up in knots with. And even if you could answer every one of their claims, they just come up like a hydrant with another claim. Chop it off and another one will come up and they'll keep arguing with you. But if you can address their conscience and they realize they stand a sinner before God, their arguments don't count for anything. Their conscience is the tool we're given, not science to argue against them. So some tools. Let's fill our pockets up with some tools. The biggest, most powerful, most useful tool, the simplest to ever get hold of, we've already spoken about earlier on, is what if? When they say, I don't believe in God. What if there was a God? I don't believe in heaven or hell. What if there was a heaven and hell? I haven't got an immortal soul. When I'm dead, I'm dead. What if when you're dead, you're not dead? Because they don't know. And often by using the simple term, what if, or suppose, or, dress it up in whatever way you like. But that sort of idea can get you around most, if not all, arguments that they have with you. Many, many, many of them are just dealt with what if. There's the atheist test. We've not got them for sale, but they're available in your notes, and for other people elsewhere, we can put it perhaps up on a caption on the screen or something. livingwaterseu.com. It's on the front of your notebook. livingwaterseu.com is where we can get the tracts that we're using here in England. And the atheist test is one of them. And there's lots of versions of the atheist test, but here's a little tract you can work through with people if you want. But let's invent some atheist test questions here today. What do you reckon the combined weight of all the sand on all the shores of the islands of Hawaii are, the beaches of Hawaii? To the nearest, I don't know, say kilogram. Like I'm being modern, I'd normally say pound. How much is it? Hands up, who knows? Come on, that's an easy one, really. In terms of cosmic, what's it? That's an easy question, isn't it? Hands up. You know. Easier one. How many hairs are there on a fully grown male Tibetan yak? And again, we go to within 5. How many hairs are there on a male Tibetan yak? No one? Only God knows. But even if they went and picked everyone off, some poor dead male, or even a live one, it'd be quite dangerous, that wouldn't it? And counted them. What we're looking for is the fact that they don't know everything. And suppose they know half of everything. Is it possible, and some people who know a few things more than I do, Thomas Edison says we don't know 1/1,000,000th of 1% of anything, but is it possible that in the half that they don't know, there's ample evidence and proof for God and his righteous judgment upon sinners? Because they don't know, unless they know everything. So that's the atheist test. What about no gold in China? That's another one. I don't know why it's China. It's always China that I've heard, and it's always China I use. It could be anywhere. It could be France. No gold in China. What do I need to know to be able to say there is no gold in China? I need to know China. What about China? I need to know every tooth to make sure there's not a dental filling. I need to know every pagoda or whatever they call these things. I need to know inside every temple. I need to know every jeweler's shop. I need to know inside every rock. I need to know every atom. To know there's no gold, I need to know every atom in China, don't I? Every atom. What do I need to know there is gold in China? Go on. One little bit of gold in China. That's all I need to see. A wedding ring, a tooth, a bit of gold leaf on a building. Any one little bit. So to say there's no God, what do they need to know? Everything. Not only everything on Earth, or everything in our solar system, or everything in our galaxy or our universe, but with their ideas about multiverses and so on, they need to know a lot more than that. With their ideas about the multiverse and string theory and superstring theory and other spaghetti-based ideas, you need to know everything about everything, everywhere, anytime to know there's no God. What do I need to know there is a God? I need to have met him on my knees. I need to have read the Bible and seen some evidence. It's not hard. So, there's a couple of ideas. Atheists, what I like to do with atheists, I like to make them backslide to become agnostics or something. You know, they'd love to have a sinner backslide, but I like to have an atheist backslide to become just an agnostic or someone who says, I don't know. Pascal's wager is another one. We'll look at that later. But Pascal's wager is another one we can do. So just here as an aside, when you're talking with an atheist and they come up with questions you can't answer, what do? You're talking with someone and they come up with a question you can't answer. What answers are there for that? Well, I like to put the arrow prayer. God, what's the answer? Because sometimes he'll inspire you and answer it for you. Sometimes he'll give you way more than that in some ways. I was listening a while ago about someone whose husband was about to pray for someone who was sick, and the wife said, who's so-and-so? He said, I don't know anybody that name. Who's so-and-so? I don't know. Yes, you do. You're having an affair with her. God had given her a word of knowledge into that situation. Well, maybe God will give you an answer for that question. You can admit you don't know. Do you know there's no shame in not knowing everything? They don't. There's no shame in not knowing everything. Admit you don't know it. But the best bit really is take down their phone number and say, I'll get back to you with an answer. Are they going to give you their phone number? Why not? Surely they want to know the answer to this question they've asked. No. They don't want the answer. They just want to shut you up. They're not ready for the gospel because they're still proud. If they give you their answer, if they give you their phone number rather, you can get in touch with your pastor, look up on the internet, find an answer for them and get back to them. But probably 99% of the time, if you say, look, give me your phone number and I'll get back to you with an answer, they don't want to know the answer because they don't want God. They want to continue with their, as we had it earlier from Huxley, they want to continue with their sexual mores or their other things in life. So that's the atheist. What about how do we address the homosexual? Now, here I've put homosexual particularly for particular reasons, but it could be just as easily the alcoholic or the drug addict or whatever else you want to do, a particular sin. How do we address people with particular sins? Because I think we need to consider that. So how do we address people with particular sins? Say the homosexual. Would you consider yourself to be a good person? I've given you the answer. There you are. Would you consider yourself to be a good person? And they may want to try and sidetrack you into specifically talking about homosexuality. I may want to challenge you about that and try and get you to speak ill against homosexuality. And I would be cautious about that. And I would take care about what you say about homosexuality in public. God does say it's an offense to him, but we need to be careful. I would say that if you feel called to do street evangelism, you can't read it very clearly there, can you? I do not recommend that you single out homosexuality as a special sin. Now, if God calls you to have a prophetic ministry speaking out against it, then do so. And take the consequences as a good servant of God. You may need to lay down your freedom or whatever for doing that. But you know, all sex outside marriage is immoral. Not just homosexuality. So all sex, in fact, all sin is worthy of judgment. So we don't need to go particularly down that. You may want to record yourself for it. Let's have a look. John 3:18, well-known verse. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already because he is a homosexual. No? Oh. He's condemned already because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. That's where we stand, not condemning the homosexuality. It's wrong. All sex outside marriage is wrong. All theft is wrong. All adultery is wrong. All covetousness is wrong. All blasphemy is wrong. We don't need to single out the specific one. For all have sinned, Romans tells us, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And let's think about this. If we address their homosexuality and you speak persuasively and with great eloquence about what's wrong with it, and they become changed from that to being what they call straight, will that save them from hell? You sure? No. They will be a straight person going to hell. If you have a drug addict, no. Yes, they will. A straight person going to hell. If you have a drug addict and you persuade him off his drug habit, is he going to heaven? He's a drug-free person going to hell. If you have an alcoholic who you persuade off alcohol, they're a sober person soberly going to hell. But what if they truly get saved? Becoming truly saved will enable them to give up their immoral sexual lifestyle. The very God of peace sanctify you wholly. If you get someone truly saved and the Holy Spirit comes and lives within them, God's going to do a job of cleaning their life up. That he might sanctify and cleanse the church with the washing of water and the word. He'll clean them up. Don't worry about trying to get them sober or straight or drug-free or whatever. Worry about getting them before the cross on their knees. Who gave himself for us, that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify us unto him, a peculiar people zealous for good works. That's God's job. Our job's being a witness for the gospel. So with the homosexual, I'd say avoid specifically addressing that sin, but go with the general 10 Commandments. What about people from another faith? What about people from another faith? How do we share the gospel with them? Would you consider yourself to be a good person? And here, you may get the answer no. Because they may know from their Muslim or Hindu or whatever teaching that they're not good people and that needs addressing. But so there's another way we can work out with this. We can talk about what method of justification do they have? How are they made clean before their God? What does Islam teach? What does Hinduism, what does Buddhism teach about how you become clean before your God? How can a holy God forgive your sin? How can he deal with that? What do they weigh against their sin to balance the scales, to justify them? What do they put? Well, for a Muslim, he's got to slaughter me. I think that's the only way he can be guaranteed paradise is by killing Jews and Christians. Other than that, he hopes. But what's their method? How do they get there? What's the method of salvation? Move forward. How can a holy God forgive? What's the method of salvation? Often what I find, particularly with Muslims, I'm told that there are ways from the Quran and other ways that you can use to prove the Bible should be respected and honored, and then you can take them to the Bible and so on. But I find that they are steeped in what they believe. And what I've come to is this, that often after sharing for a while and them realizing that Islam doesn't actually give them a method of salvation, they're not ready yet to change. But I say to them, if Jesus is the only way to have your sins forgiven, would you want to know? And most have said yes to me. And I've said, would you let me pray that Jesus will reveal himself to you? And most have said yes. And I pray, God, please show yourself to him. Because I can't persuade him. He's taught in this way. Have mercy and show him yourself. And I have to leave it at that. And I know numbers of Muslims, not the ones that I've spoken to because I've not followed up, I've not seen them again, but I know numbers of Muslims who have met Jesus in a very personal way. I was at church a while ago where the man speaking came to England with millions of dollars to promote Islam. He was a missionary sent over, I don't like to use that word for them, but he was sent over on a mission to promote Islam in England with millions of dollars. And he was pushing his daughter on a swing in a garden, and Jesus met him, and he got saved. I don't know what he did with the millions of dollars. It didn't come to my ministry. Anyway, I don't know what happened there. But that's often the way with people who are fixed in another faith that I share with them at the end. I'm sure there are better ways, but that's the best I've come to. So that's some types of people you might meet. What about common objections? Again, remembering that there may be genuine questions and you may be preparing the ground, not leading people that day to salvation. So what are some common objections that we have? I don't believe in heaven or hell. What are the tools we can use against I don't believe in heaven or hell? Oh, lots of speak. One we used, 2 words earlier. What if? That's the first one I'm going to come to. What if? What if there was a heaven and a hell? That's a bit serious, isn't it? If there are only 2 destinations, you're going to one or the other. What if that's true? You could talk about gravity. What if you say, I don't believe in gravity, I'm going to step off here today? What's going to happen? Gravity is merciless and will pull you to the ground without any compassion whatsoever. Laws of physics, laws of gravity are merciless. I'm not saying the laws of God are merciless, because God is a God of mercy, but the laws of God will still drag you to hell as a sinner if you don't come to Jesus for forgiveness. The fact that you don't believe in it won't make any difference. You say you don't believe in gravity, it will not stop it pulling you to the ground. You stand in front of a bus or a train or whatever and say, I don't believe it's going to hit me, and it hits you, it will not save you from injury. Denial doesn't get you there. Pascal's wager. I don't believe in heaven or hell. When you're dead, you're dead. Well, let's have a look. What have they got to win or lose? In a wager, there were sort of like 4 answers, as it were. If I'm right, I get this one or that one. If I'm wrong, I get that one. If you're right, you get this one or that one. So here we have you're right or you're wrong. And here we have when you're dead, you're dead. That's the end of it. Or there's a God who's going to judge you. Okay? So we have this sort of 4 quadrants. So let's talk about me first of all. As a believer, if I'm right, what do I get? I get received into heaven by Jesus. If I'm wrong, and there is no heaven, there's no God, there's no... And I'm not saying I believe that. I'm not saying if, really. I believe the Bible to be true. But supposing I was deluded, what's the worst that happens to me? Nothing. I go to the grave. What's the best that happens to them? If they're right, what's the best that happens to them? Nothing. The grave. In fact, you know what? I still win because I get a plus. Because Christians, generally, and it's becoming more difficult because I think there are more people who aren't saved who claim to be Christians, and churches that are not really teaching the gospel properly, so even if people are saved, they're not being taught well. But generally speaking, Christians live happier lives, their marriages last better, their children have less problems, not no problems, but less problems, they die with less pain, they die happier. Why, as an atheist, would I want not to be a Christian? I still get life plus. Now, they may say, oh, but I get to have sexual immorality, I get to have drinks and drugs, but on the whole, they only leave you screwed up. I get life plus. Christians have a happier happiness index than unbelievers. So at the worst, I get life plus. What's their worst? They go to hell. So Pascal's wager says, you're not losing wicked anyway, as an atheist, or as someone who doesn't believe in heaven or hell. It does leave you with the question of which God, but that we answer in other ways, with the Bible and with textual criticism and so on. But to say I don't believe in heaven, you're on a losing wicket anyway. That's Pascal's wager. So God will forgive me. It doesn't matter if I do things that are wrong, because God will forgive me. What are the tools for someone who says God will forgive me? Let's have a look at some. Do you think God should forgive everybody? Generally speaking, they don't. If you say to them, well, what about, and you see this on the clip that we saw earlier, what about murderers? Do you think murderers who don't get caught should be allowed into heaven? What about liars, child abusers? Do you think child abusers, now maybe child abusers do, but most other people say, no, of course they should be, punished. Rapists. And so the question is, well, who should go to heaven? So if not everybody should be welcomed into heaven, who should be? And generally speaking, they'll say, well, good people or people who, whatever. And you say, well, are you a good person? So we're back to, showing them where they stand standard-wise. You can make it personal in that in terms of, well, God will forgive everybody. Make it personal. What if your mother or your sister was attacked or raped or killed or whatever? Should they go to heaven? You can use those sorts of things. Make it personal with them. You can say, when you say, God will forgive me, what do you need for God to forgive you? What does a person need to do for God to forgive you? Does everybody get forgiven, or do you have to do something? And often they'll then come down to, well, you have to say sorry. And you say, well, you can take them to things like, well, if you were in court, and you say to the judge, I'm sorry I was selling that cocaine, or that heroin, or I was speeding, or whatever. You say, well, you should be sorry, you did wrong, but you're still guilty. So you can use that sort of situation to show them that although they may be sorry, they should be. And eventually you're looking to get to some way of sharing with them the fact that they are guilty before God. You want to get them through the 10 Commandments, or a few of them, and show where they stand. You may want to take them to a judge and say, what would a judge do if you said sorry or whatever? Can he just let you off? He's going to ask you, do you think you're a good person? And if you're not, if you're guilty, you're going to face the wrath of the law, even if he likes you. My God would never send anybody to hell. Well, of course your God wouldn't. You just invented him. He's made up. He's a fictitious God. We're back in the... He doesn't exist. We're back in the second commandment, aren't we? They've made up a God who doesn't punish anybody, a fairy tale God. That is a myth. The God who would never say boo to a goose, or whatever you might say to whatever term you might have for wouldn't be nasty to anybody. The God who would never punish badness. You talk then about things like what would happen to a child who's never corrected. Would that be right? Would that be good? I guess today in modern society that might be what they want. I don't believe in God. Isn't that the same as the atheist? Well, sort of, but we've got some more tools to look at. It's like the timid atheist, perhaps. Not an atheist would say, I know there's no God. An agnostic would say, I don't think there's a God. So, again, we're into what if probably here. I don't believe in God, what if? So I can say, what if I can prove God in 30 seconds? Do you know how to prove God in 30 seconds? Would you like to know how to prove God in 30 seconds? Can you prove God in 30 seconds? I mean, we've been here hundreds of years as a church trying to share the gospel. Can we prove God in 30 seconds? Let's have a go. Prove God in 30 seconds. Okay. When you see a painting, you know there was a painter. You can't see him, can't smell him. That's what they say about God. I can't see him, touch him, taste him, whatever. There's no God. I don't believe in a God. Well, I can't see, touch, taste, or whatever. I don't want to taste the painter, but you know what I mean. But I know there was a painter because there is a painting. With a building. It was built by somebody, but he's long gone. Where's the builder for this place? I don't know. Probably dead. Definitely dead. But I know there was a builder because there's a building. So, when I see creation, I know that there was an accident. What? I may lose my 30 seconds now. I've got all the necessary bits for a mousetrap in here. Now, in evolution, you don't... stop your clock for a minute on the 30 seconds. In evolution, you don't even start with all the necessary bits. You start with just hydrogen and helium and a few other bits of matter, but probably don't matter, actually. I've got all the necessary bits for a mousetrap in here. There's only 9 bits. Surely, by chance, they can come together, can't they, and form a mousetrap? Do you want to shake it for a bit? Don't bother. I've shaken this for a long time, and I've still got no mousetrap because it's impossible. Things don't come together by chance. So, there's not an accident. So, start your clocks again. So, when you see a creation, you know there was a creator. It's obvious, and Romans 1 tells us that. If we go there. Now, this illustration is biblical because it comes from this verse here in Hebrews. For every house is builded by some man, but he that builded all things, creation, is God. It's a biblical example, so you can use that with some confidence out there because God uses it. Who built this house? A builder. Who built the universe? Everything. God, the creator. Anybody here a bit of a petrol head? Likes cars? No one? Someone here must like cars. Oh, there's one or two. One or two. If you, and this could work with other things as well, but let's just example. Cars, perhaps you've got some teenagers, one of them's got himself a new car and he likes it a bit and he likes, revving it and so on. So you can use this with them. You can talk to them about their car. You go through it and sort of what make is it, what model is it, a nice color. That's about where I am with cars. Technology-wise, it's a nice color, isn't it? It's a good car. Talk to them for a while and then say, look, let me tell you what I believe about cars. I believe that over millions of years it rained on rocks that contained metal ores. What are you doing laughing at me? And again, we have a good time with people by doing this. I believe that it rained for millions of years on rocks that contain metal ores, and gradually the shape of a car was left as it was eroded. And that over more millions of years, in an oxygen-free atmosphere, chemicals began to form paint on the body. And they'll tell you this, believe you me. And then, as if by magic, wires, because there's always in evolution, there's always a bit of magic, isn't there? Somehow, it just happened that, by chance, wires appeared and light bulbs appeared. And they're going to think you're bonkers, because you would be bonkers. And what you're looking at to show them is that design proves there was a... And everything that science ever finds always points to a designer. Listen to your atheist naturalist or whatever, and they keep saying how marvelously designed this was for that or designed this was for the other. They just can't keep that word out of their mouths. So there's another idea for people who don't believe in God. What about Mount Rushmore? Anybody know Mount Rushmore? It's that place with the president's faces on it. Now, you can use other things, but Mount Rushmore. Do you believe that by natural erosion those faces occurred on there? Because that's what I believe. I believe that it rained on it and these faces popped out. Of course not. A man worked for years and years to carve those. But they believe, and they'd think you were mad if you said otherwise, wouldn't they? But they believe that the presidents themselves happened by chance. The faces on a rock, a dumb, dead face, can't happen by chance, but the living, speaking, country-ruling president himself can happen by chance. They're off their chumps. And so we could use, for that, you could use whatever you're around. If you're in London, you could use Nelson's column, or get a coin out your pocket and you've got the Queen's face on there, and you can do the same thing with a coin to illustrate that. So, God can't send people to hell forever, can he? That wouldn't be right. You've been given a choice. God doesn't just send people there with no choice. I'm here speaking to you now because God wants you to come to Jesus. The thief comes but to kill, steal, and kill, and destroy. I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. That's what God wants. So he's not sending them to hell for his fun. It's because it's what they deserve. He wants other than that. He that cometh to Jesus, I will not cast away. We've been listening to the devil since the Garden of Eden, and it's been getting us into trouble, and we've been suffering for it since. If you listen to him today, you will end up with the consequences of it. Supposing you came to my house for dinner. I invited you around for dinner. And I said, this one door, it's not good to go through that door. Through that door, there's a lion. I happen to have a thing about lions. I like keeping them. And I put him away, so don't open the door. Whose fault is it if you open the door? Whose fault? Mine? I put warnings up. I told you don't open it. There were signs on the door. There's plenty of signs in the world. There's signs in your heart to start with. The law is written on their hearts. They know. They are, what does Romans say? They are without excuse. They have the choice. They are without excuse. God warned Adam and Eve. He sent the Hebrew nation to be a testimony of how God would deal with sin through a sacrifice, and showing the importance of sin to God, the horror of it, that animals had to die, that blood must be spilt. Later, Jesus came and spilled his blood that they may not have to go to hell. It's not where they're meant to be. It wasn't made for them. Hell is a place of everlasting fire prepared for the... Where? the devil and his angels. Not for them. Wasn't made for them. It's made for the devil and his angels. How could a good God not send evil people to hell? What could he do with it? Would he allow it into heaven? What would he... You see, we're to some extent, we're eternal beings, and we've got to spend eternity somewhere. The Bible says man is mortal, but I think that's our physical body is mortal. We're going to die. Our spirits are going to spend eternity somewhere. Would you allow all the evil people into heaven? What would heaven become like? It would be filthy and polluted as is in our world today. Should heaven be allowed to be polluted forever? What about evolution disproves God, doesn't it? I have no time for this today, but the short answer is no, evolution doesn't disprove God. The long answer is no, the Bible disproves evolution. DrDino.com, it's got another name now, but DrDino.com still takes you there. It's easiest to remember. Dinosaurs, the guy likes dinosaurs. DrDino.com, that's where you can get the 7 series. There's only 6 in the one we sell here, but the 7 series, DVD series on creation versus evolution and why science supports creation, not evolution. If you want, I can't deal with that in an evening in today. If you want me to come to it another time, give me a call. We'll come and spend perhaps a whole evening working on why science supports the Bible, not evolution. You can't trust the Bible, though, can you? Because it's just this made-up history book, and it's hundreds of years old, and it's a Bronze Age fairy tale, isn't it? Well, let's have a look. They'll often say something to you like, prove the Bible's true to me scientifically. What does that show? That actually it shows they don't understand evidence. How do you prove the Bible scientifically? You don't. Let's have a look at some other things. Prove to me you're married scientifically. Well, you can see how haggard I am. Prove to me you're married. How do you do it? You can't. Hang on a minute. We use documentary evidence. I've got a marriage certificate. That's how I prove I'm married. I use documentary evidence, not scientific evidence. Prove to me what you had for Christmas dinner, last Christmas. How are you going to prove that scientifically? Picture. Well, that's not science. Pictures lie. Believe you me, I've seen the cinema. How do you do it? Eyewitness. I saw what he had. Oh, did he pig out? Eyewitness evidence. See, you've got to understand evidence law before you can know how you prove the Bible. Let's have a look at documentary evidence. Looking at ancient manuscripts, and it may not be too clear up there, but Herodias' history, we have 8 old copies of it, 8 early manuscript copies of that. Aristotle's philosophy, and no one ever questions that Aristotle said these things or wrote these things. We've got just 50 copies of it, early ones. Caesar's Gallic Wars, we have 10 copies. Homer, the Iliad, we've got more of that. We've got 643 early manuscript copies of Homer's Iliad. What about the New Testament? Early manuscript copies, we have 24, nearly 25,000 early manuscript copies. But of course they don't count, all the others do. We never question what Aristotle may have said, as well that might have been made up by someone. History never does. Another important consideration is the time from when something happened to the time it's first written down and we have that copy. It's an important period of time. What was it like for, let's go back to the same books, Herodias' history. There were 1,300 years from the time he wrote what he wrote to the first copy of what he wrote we have. 1,300 years. That's a long time. It's not questioned as to whether it's an accurate copy or not. Of course it's an accurate copy. Aristotle's philosophy, it's 1,400 years from the time he spoke his thoughts to the first copy we have of them. A little better for Caesar's Gallic Wars and Homer's Iliad's only 500 years. Do you know, 500 years is a long time, isn't it? What was happening in England 500 years ago? Charles I, beheaded. Long time ago. 500 years, a long time for errors to break in. In the New Testament, it's somewhere between 50 years and 150 years, depending on who's right with their interpretation of things, but it's a small amount of time. If you were to take every Bible and you destroyed it, every early manuscript copy, and there were how many? 25,000 nearly. You got rid of all of those. We could recreate the entire New Testament except 11 verses from other sources of writing. Yet they say, oh, it's just a Bronze Age myth. Every verse except 11 is verifiable by outside sources. Early church fathers, commentators, historians who wrote, and when they wrote, they copied out bits of the Bible they were commenting on, and it's all there, apart from 11 verses, verifiable. From 86,000 plus verifiable sources outside the Bible. So documentary evidence supports the Bible. What about eyewitness evidence? What did you have for Christmas dinner? To whom also he showed himself alive. We've seen him, showed himself alive by many infallible proofs. So documentary evidence supports what the Bible says, and the Bible says, we have seen him. We have seen him, which we have heard, which we have seen with our own eyes, eyewitness, which we have looked upon and our hands have handled. They're not myths, they're eyewitness records. Now, don't worry about writing all this down. Don't worry about learning this. This is really for your encouragement, not for sharing the gospel on the streets. But it is a trustworthy book. For we have not followed cunningly devised fables. They knew what a fable was then too. We're not the only ones who have a brain in our heads. They knew what. We have not followed those, but were eyewitnesses of Jesus' majesty. The Bible is trustworthy. We've documentary evidence, we've eyewitness evidence. And if you want to see more of this, the best place I know, the best speaker I know on this is Josh McDowell, josh.org. Josh, josh.org is the best place I know to go and look for his lectures on Can I Trust the Bible. He also has a couple of books out. The Bible is True and Evidence That Demands a Verdict. In fact, we've now got new evidence that demands a verdict. And of course, the Spirit himself bears witness within us. You know. And they know. Because they have a conscience within them. So I think this is lastly-ish. If God was so powerful, how come he hasn't got rid of all evil now? Several reasons. One, he didn't want us to be robots. He didn't want us to be automaton. He wanted people with real minds who could really be in communication with him and could really worship him. If you were just a robot, who wants a friendship with a robot? Even when they try and make robots that we can have friendship with, they like to make them look as much like humans as we can. He didn't want us to be slaves. Okay, you could have real minds, but he forces you to be good. He didn't want slaves either. Slavery is abominable to us. He doesn't want slaves either. What's the time? You don't need to know what it is now, but what is the time? Anybody got the time? 1:05. What would happen to you if at 1:06 he got rid of all evil? You'd be gone. Smoking boots. Nothing you can say to them. If they say, why didn't God deal with all evil? What's the time? What would happen if in a minute's time God dealt with all evil? It's because of his mercy that he does not deal with all evil now, because he wants you to have a chance to call on him for salvation. Out of his mercy, he doesn't deal with all evil now. Any questions before we tie up there? So the question there for those who haven't got a microphone, how can we deal with people who know there's a designer but they think it was an extraterrestrial? Well, of course, all you do is you just push it back one. Who designed the extraterrestrial? That's all they're doing, is they're just making it a bigger question. Who designed the extraterrestrial? They know, because we know they know, because Romans tells us that they know, and I believe the Bible. Do you believe the Bible? They know there's a God. So don't be fooled by people who say, well, I don't believe there's a God. I believe it was an extraterrestrial. They're just avoiding. It's just a blocking tactic. And the answer, of course, is, who made the extraterrestrial? And what evidence do you have for that over what I believe? Mine makes scientific sense. Yours is just a myth from a distance. But they may say mine's a myth. But again, we're looking for those who are able to become humble under the Holy Spirit. So it doesn't matter. Are you a good person? Any other questions?
Is it right if they marry the same sex?
Sorry?
Is it right if they marry the same sex?
Homosexuality, is it right they marry the same sex? I believe no. And the Bible fairly clearly says, for that reason God made them male and... He made Adam and Steve. No, sorry, Adam and Eve. Didn't he? Not Adam and Steve. Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. It's a creation ordinance. If you go back to Genesis, in Genesis' first 3 chapters, he says, for this reason shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, not husband. But if I was doing evangelism, I wouldn't argue around that area, because I don't want them to get me into a hate crime. Now, it's strange, isn't it? Because they talk about hate crimes. If you hate someone, do you want them to join your club? If you hate someone, do you want to save them from hell? If you hate someone, do you want them to have the best life they could have? Yet they call it a hate crime when you want them to become your brother or sister. That's not a hate crime. It's a hate crime against Christians to accuse us of hate, because we don't hate. Out of love we do this. But they'll accuse you. So to avoid being accused of that, I would say, well, let's leave that aside. Let's have a look at the 10 Commandments.
Why did God allow disaster to happen, like tsunami, or people hungry and die?
So why does God allow disasters and people hungry and so on? It's a very difficult question in some ways. There are answers, but they're not easy to share with people. Why shouldn't he, to start with? If people hate him and are hateful against him, why should he protect them? God says he puts a hedge of protection around his people, not around the people who hate him. But disasters come from many, many reasons. We have cancer and other things in the world, often because of man's wickedness. We have every lungful of breath you take has 70,000 man-made chemicals in it. They probably don't do you any good. So a lot of the illnesses and diseases we have come from stress, from sin, from pollution. A lot of the accidents that come from natural caused problems, like you build a house on a floodplain and it floods. That must be God's fault. That we live in a broken and corrupt world that is struggling under sin. But also we have the fact that God does judge people. The day the tsunami hit Japan, they had publicly declared that they stand against Israel and with the Palestinians. Now, I'm not saying that I can prophetically tell you that that was a judgment from God against them, but it looks that way. And God has the right to. If people wickedly stand against his ways, he may well bring judgments. on people. And do you know there are no innocent people? Why should the innocent people suffer with the Japanese? How many people are innocent? Are you innocent? Are you a good person? Let me ask you a few questions, see if you're a good person. We're all in rebellion against God. And his mercy is that he doesn't kill us all now. But he will not hold back his patience forever. One day he's going to judge the whole world and burn the whole world up. Any other questions before lunch?
How do you politely end the person who chose to be proud?
How do I politely end the person who turns to be proud? How do I end the conversation with somebody who chooses to be proud? I might actually address that fact and say, look, I'm sorry, Steve or Jane or whoever. It's obvious that at the moment, you don't want God in your life, do you? You know there's a God. I know you know that. You're going to deny it to me, but you know it. And in your private life, from now onwards, whenever you are in this, you think of this, you'll know you were denying the truth. But at the moment, you're not ready for God. So I'll leave you. But if ever you want to find God, find a church, find a bookshop that sells the Bible, and get yourself right with God, because you know where you stand. Because they do know that. I might also give them one of the coins that we have and say, look, thank you very much for your time. Let me just give you this as a thank you for, and it's just something they can keep in their pocket, they can keep it coming back to them. I could say to them, well, maybe one day you'll get round to it. And so I could give them the round to it tract for when you get round to it. Never have used one myself, but Deborah has. I've never used one, but because I never carry them. But you can have those as well. So just address it. Say, look, obviously at the moment you think yourself a good person. You know you're not, but you're saying you do. Any other questions? Just wait for the microphone to get to you, then people can hear it. And another one over there later. So
quite often people ask about those, in far off lands that have never heard of God and may never
die in their ignorance.
Be likely to hear either, because they're so remote. So what happens? So they ask those questions too.
The far off lands question, as it were. Well, there are there are lots of ways of addressing this, but a couple of them would be, I suppose, to look at the fact, and it's difficult because you may need to take them to a longish passage in Romans, but say Romans 1 tells me, the Bible tells me, perhaps you say, that they know in their heart and they still reject. They'll be judged according to their knowledge. God is a righteous judge. They may not know what his name is. They may not know the Bible and the history of Israel, but they know there's a God whom they don't want to obey. They know they lust, they steal, they lie, and they know those things are wrong because their conscience tells them that it's wrong, but they never get down to saying, God, I know I do wrong. They deny the God they do know, even if they don't know the God of the Bible. There's the fact that no one ever does come to Jesus unless he calls them anyway. No one will, turn from their sin. No one will call on him. And of course, if you're really concerned about them, sorry, what's your name? Chris. If you're an unbeliever and your name's Chris, and Chris, if you really are concerned about them, I'll tell you what, come to my church, we'll teach you the gospel, you can go out there and reach them. If you really have a heart for them, we'll send you. They don't have a heart for them, they don't care. They're just wanting a diverting tactic to come against. So you want to try and deal with it briefly and then get back to, but what about yourself? You have heard today. They're going to be judged by what they know. You're going to be judged by how you respond to what you know. And today I'm here, sent by God, to speak to you. You could talk about perhaps the sort of helicopters and boats scenario. Do you know that one? Where there's someone sat on a roof. And, a helicopter goes past and they say, come with us, we'll rescue you. And say, no, God will save me. And another helicopter comes past and says, no, God will save me. And a boat comes past, jump in the boat and says, no, God will save me, and they drown. And God said, well, I sent you 2 helicopters and a boat. Today, you have me. Listen, I don't know what's going to happen about them. God will do what's right by them, but today, you have me. Are you going to reject today the helicopter or boat that God sent you today to reach you with the gospel? There's another question at the back here.
Yeah, we talked about lying. If somebody comes up with a gun in your front door, I say, I want to shoot your son, and your son is inside, and he asks you, is your son is inside? Will you say yes or no?
Sorry, if someone comes up with a gun and asks if there's someone
somebody
inside.
come and turn up in front of your door,
Yeah.
and you know you want to shoot your son. He said, I want to shoot your son. And he has a gun, some group of people, and you know that your son is inside. And he says, is your son inside? Would you say yes or no?
I'll probably lie. But I'll be guilty of it. I don't know what I'd do in those circumstances. Who does know what your heart would be? My trust should be that it's in God's hands. And I can say, I'm not going to answer you one way or the other. You put your gun away. You're guilty before God of attempted murder. Are you a good person? Who are you to judge my son? Let's talk about you and your sin. And he'll shoot me. But God can't, you can't scare me with heaven, so it doesn't matter.
Just going to say one thing on that. Sometimes when Jesus was asked questions, he didn't always answer them. I'm just trying to think when that was now. They were asking him, the people were asking him questions. He didn't always answer them. He'd sometimes answer them with a question.
Yeah.
Saying, well,
But I ask
where
you.
I ask you, where does your authority for this question come from? If you're here with a gun, why do I have to answer you? What's your authority from? You don't always have to answer the question.
That's similar to a question that was asked me earlier, to some extent, which was, well, I told a lie, but it was only a white lie. Is God going to send me to hell for one white lie? That's on the video with the BBC video, Deborah. Will God send me to hell for one white lie? Well, you show me someone who's only in their life committed one white lie. They've never lied, a black lie. They've never stolen, they've never lusted, never blasphemed, never anything else. I'll plead that person's case before God, but I'm not going to have a long list to plead, am I? Because no one has ever only told one white lie. It just doesn't happen. Time's really winding up now. Perhaps we'll have one more question and we'll go to lunch. And if you've got more questions, we'll have more time this afternoon. There was one more person, I think, over the back there. Just wait for the microphone to get to you. There's time. Ask me after we finish.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, for example, you want to preach the gospel to somebody who is hurting. Maybe different things have happened in their lives whereby it have made them, to be so hardened at heart. How do you preach the gospel to such people?
Compassionately. How do we preach the gospel to somebody who's had things that have made them hard of heart, I think is the question there. I guess compassionately, first of all, you sympathize, you say those things are terrible. But who's responsible for them? God doesn't invent ways for you, normally doesn't invent ways for you to be punished. There are times he does. But wicked people have done these bad things to you. And you care. But you eventually come down to the fact that these are terrible people. They're bad people. What about yourself? Are you a good person? If God were to judge you for your acts, he'll judge them for their acts. These people have done nasty things to you. They've, bullied you, or they've stolen from you, or whatever. God will judge them for that. But what about you? How would you stand on Judgment Day before God? Don't let these things embitter you. Get right before God. Anyway, we'll leave it there.